My name's Anna. I'm 20, and this happened just this summer when I came home for vacation from university. It was one of those spontaneous ideas I thought, why not surprise my parents? I didn't tell them I was coming, which made me even more excited. As I dragged my suitcase through the familiar streets of my small hometown, I couldn't wait to see their reactions. When I opened the front door, expecting hugs and shocked faces from Mom and Dad, I found silence. It turned out they weren't home yet. I was about to feel disappointed when a familiar voice called out my name. It was Liam, my little brother, who had recently turned 18. He was taller now, a bit broader too, with a smile that could light up any room. "Liam," I exclaimed, dropping my bags as we hugged. It was one of those easy, natural greetings, but I couldn't help noticing how grown up he looked. When Liam left to finish something outside, I closed the door and let out a deep breath. The house was so quiet, and the realization that I was truly home started to sink in. After the long trip from university, dealing with crowded buses and noisy train stations, I needed to shake off the exhaustion. I decided to head straight to the shower. The hot water hit my skin, washing away the grime of travel. For the first time in weeks, I felt myself start to relax. It had been a rough semester, assignments, deadlines, and the constant rush of university life. But now, standing under the stream of water, I let my shoulders drop and finally exhaled. After the shower, I threw on a loose summer dress. It was light and soft, the kind of outfit you wear when you're not trying too hard, just comfortable enough to lounge in. Barefoot, I padded to my room, pushing open the door and letting the familiar coziness wrap around me. My old posters were still on the walls. The bed was still made with my favorite patterned sheets. It was like stepping back into another version of myself. But something else had been tugging at the back of my mind. I'd been so busy with school and so focused on work that I hadn't really had much of a personal life. The intimacy I used to take for granted had been missing for a while now. Sure, there had been dates here and there, but nothing serious, nothing real. And in a shared dorm with thin walls and nosy roommates, it wasn't like there were many opportunities to unwind. As I sank onto my bed, the thought stuck with me. It wasn't just about needing someone else, it was about feeling connected to myself again, feeling in tune with my own needs. I grabbed my phone, scrolling aimlessly at first, but my mind soon wandered elsewhere. Lying back against the pillows, I let my fingers graze my skin. It was instinctive, more about reconnecting than anything else. My hands roamed over my arms, my collarbone, and the soft fabric of my dress. I let out a shaky breath, just letting myself feel and unwind after everything I'd been pushing through. I wasn't thinking about much else when I heard a knock on my door. My heart jumped into my throat, and I practically threw my phone to the side. "Anna," Liam's voice came from the other side. I quickly adjusted myself, smoothing my dress as I called out for him to come in. Liam opened the door, hesitating for a moment before stepping inside. I could tell something was on his mind. His expression was less carefree than usual. He stood there awkwardly for a second before finally making his way to the edge of my bed, sitting down and running a hand through his hair. I stayed quiet, giving him the space to work through whatever was bothering him. Finally, he started to talk. His words came out haltingly at first, but then the story poured out. He talked about his girlfriend, a relationship I knew he'd been in for a while. From what I'd heard before, I always thought they were happy together, one of those young, carefree relationships where everything feels fun and exciting. But apparently, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. He told me how they'd been fighting a lot lately, over little things and big things alike. He felt like no matter what he did, it wasn't enough to make her happy. She'd get upset with him over things he didn't even realize were a problem, and the arguments always left him feeling drained. He admitted that he cared about her, but wasn't sure if he could keep going like this. The relationship was starting to feel more like a burden than something that brought him joy. As he talked, I couldn't help but notice how much he'd changed since the last time we spent real time together. He wasn't the same kid I used to tease or babysit. He had this quiet maturity about him now, this depth I hadn't seen before. It hit me all at once. He'd grown up. Not just physically, though that was hard to ignore too. His shoulders were broader, his face more defined. He carried himself differently, with a confidence that hadn't been there before. I listened intently, my mind half on his words and half on this new realization about him. There was something magnetic about him now, something that made it hard to look away. I didn't stop either. I squeezed my eyes shut and felt his hands on me, lower than they should have been. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. I wanted to move, to sit up, to tell him to stop, but I didn't. I couldn't. I let it happen. Even now, I don't know why. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe I was too desperate to feel wanted, even if it was wrong. Or maybe I just didn't care anymore. That day on the beach, everything inside me broke. Nothing would ever be the same again. By the way, if you've made it this far into the story, thank you for sticking with me. I know it's not an easy thing to hear, and I appreciate you listening. If you're finding this video interesting, or if you think there's someone who could relate to what I'm sharing, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps me keep sharing stories like this, and lets me know I'm not alone out here. Alright, let's get back to it. After that day at the beach, something shifted. I couldn't ignore it. What I felt, what I saw, and how Leonard looked at me afterward. It wasn't just a lingering gaze or a passing moment, it was constant. Every time I caught his eye, there was something different in him, something I didn't want to name, but couldn't unsee. I tried to bury it when we got back home that evening. I did everything I could to act normal. I made dinner. I asked Leonard about school. I folded laundry late into the night, my hands shaking the whole time. I kept replaying everything that happened, his hands, the way he lingered, the tension I felt in my own body. I hated myself for it. I hated him for making me feel this way about my own son. Phoenix didn't notice a thing. He came home late as usual, his tie loose, his face tired. He kissed my cheek out of habit, just a ghost of what it used to be. Long day? I asked, hoping for some kind of conversation. He grunted and nodded, already halfway to the living room. It was always like this. His presence felt like an afterthought, and I felt invisible again. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Phoenix snored softly beside me. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I kept thinking about Leonard, about his hands and his gaze. I knew it wasn't right. I knew I should stop it, whatever it was, before it went any further. But there was another part of me, something dark, something lonely, that wanted to hold on to it, that craved the attention, the touch, the feeling of being seen. The days passed and Leonard didn't say anything, but his silence was louder than words. He didn't avoid me, not exactly. Instead, it was like he stayed closer. I'd catch him watching me when I cooked, when I cleaned, when I sat alone on the couch at night. And I let it happen. I didn't stop him. I didn't stop myself. Then came the next weekend. It was hot again, and the house felt stifling. Phoenix was gone, working some last-minute shift, leaving me and Leonard alone, just like before. I asked him if he wanted to go back to the beach, just the two of us. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought being outside would help clear my mind. Maybe I wanted to test myself, to see if I could push it all away. The drive was quiet. This time, Leonard didn't wear his earbuds, though. He just sat there, looking out the window, his knee bouncing restlessly. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the silence, but every time I opened my mouth, the words stuck in my throat. When we got to the beach, it was almost empty. I remember how blue the water looked, how the wind felt on my face. I spread out the towels again, just like before, and Leonard helped me set everything up. I didn't ask him to rub oil on my back this time. I couldn't. Instead, I laid there with my eyes closed, pretending everything was fine. But even with my eyes shut, I could feel his gaze. I could feel him watching me. The real breaking point came later that afternoon. We decided to rinse off at the beach showers before heading home. It was supposed to be quick, just to get the sand off our skin, but something happened then that I still can't explain. When we reached the showers, Leonard stepped under first, letting the water run down his back. I stood off to the side, watching him for a moment before I stepped in too. I don't know what came over me, but I peeled off my outer clothing and stood beside him. The water was cool against my skin. Leonard looked at me, startled. I don't know if it was surprise, confusion, or something else entirely, but he didn't say a word. I glanced at him, then really looked at him, and said, "You should take off your shorts too. You need to rinse properly." I don't know why I said it. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I could be in control, that I could make this stop. Or maybe I was testing him, testing myself. He hesitated for a second, then did as I said, sliding his shorts off. And there we were, together, alone. The water poured down on us, washing everything away, except what we were both feeling. I turned my back to him and asked softly, "Help me with my back." And he did. His hands were careful again, just like before, but there was no mistaking the tension. I felt it in him. I felt it in me. When he touched my waist, I froze. The air seemed to thicken around us, the sound of the water drowning out everything else. I could have walked away. I could have stopped it. But instead, I leaned back closer to him.